Good afternoon, good evening, good morning to all of you, whether you're watching live or later on demand. Thank you so much for joining us again for this very special episode. But before we begin, we want to, of course, welcome our favorite and special friend, Mr. Billy Joe Wright.
Again, I want to say I wish when I walked into my family events and stuff, they introduced me the way that you do. But I do understand what Oprah and people like that say, that every day when they would do their show, they'd walk out to an audience cheering, and that no matter how many times they did it, they're like, why do people respond this way? So I got 8 more months left as being president of the Hacienda La Puente Teachers Association. So I'm going to take it at every show. And then I will continue being an audience member. So good evening, everybody. My name is Billy Joe Wright. I am a high school government econ social sciences teacher for Workman High School, currently on hiatus while I'm president. Like I said, for 8 more months. And then who knows, maybe Teresa Ricardo will be running for president. And yes, I see where you're trying to point. Yes. I want to, take a minute and thank you for continuing this series. We've gotten so many great responses from people, and I think that it really does show how many of us, of everyone, have felt parts of us have been unseen. Because now people are being not only encouraged, but being empowered to either ask or demand to be seen. And it's really cool. It's really cool because the parts that people identify with within themselves are all different. It could be, ethnicity, it could be gender, sexuality, roles that they play in their families. And it's just really exciting to see how far we've come. And so again, I want to thank you for continuing this series on embracing diversity with culturally inclusive teaching. I loved hearing that we were going to be able to do this episode about celebrating Filipino American History Month. I love it. I love it. And then when I saw our guests that were going to be on today, it's one thing for us to highlight within our own district, but we are all one family. We are all one world. And with everything that is happening in the world right now, we really do need to break down the walls that are between us and our neighbors, us and our own colleagues, and come out of our silos to celebrate each other. So I see today's episode as extending what we've been doing within HLPTA and within our district, and modeling in our own little way that, we can celebrate ourselves and each other outside of our own spaces. So I can't wait for you to bring on the guests. I'd like to meet them as well together, thank them for being here. And then, like I always do, I will be an audience member, learning and celebrating along with everybody else.
Thank you so much, Billy Joe Wright. We know today is a super, super busy day for you and a lot of us at HLP. So we appreciate the time for coming out and always the beautiful words. You just have a way with words. So thank you. Thank you. We appreciate you. And we are excited to get going on this show. So thank you, Billy. We'll see you.
I want to meet them real quick, though. I want to meet them. Yeah, so I'm gonna hang on a minute because I want to thank them personally for being here, and then I will go away.
All right, let's bring them in, Ricardo. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just say their names really quickly so you can greet them, Billy Joe, and then we're going to go ahead and get started. So we have our very own Mrs. Rodriguez. I'm sure you see her around. And we have Dr. Emily Bautista, and we have Cindy Ting as well. Welcome, everybody.
Dr. Emily Bautista, Cindy Ting, Imelda Cladera Rodriguez. I just wanted to take a minute and say directly to you, thank you for being here. The idea that you're making time for us so that we could celebrate you and learn from you means a lot. And again, I love seeing what teachers do and what all of us educators and people in our different fields, we're from our car, right? We're anything to make it happen. Cindy, I am an Anaheim resident. The work that you do in Anaheim Union is as important to what we do here. Imelda, you and the other two guests today, in your own spaces, give us something to strive for. I'm of mixed race. I grew up living in two different worlds with my nana, who only spoke Spanish in our house, but with my light skin. When I was in school, it was like I was white, and when I was home, my friends would be like, "We want to go to that house where they're always making enchiladas and tacos," and then I'd be with my cousins, and it'd be all Spanish speaking, but back at school in all English. And so we all come from these various backgrounds. I live in Orange County. My partner runs a nonprofit there called Abrazad. And so the work that you all do in the spaces, we honor you all today. So that's what I wanted to say to you directly on behalf of our Hacienda La Puente Teachers Association 1,000 members and our audience that Teresa and Ricardo have built out there. So I will be listening and learning. You all have a good evening. And again, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Mr.
Thank you,
Billy.
Billy.
All right. Again, so thank you. Welcome, everybody. We are officially ready to start our show, and we're continuing our series of embracing diversity with culturally inclusive teaching. And this is such a special episode to me and many others. We are celebrating Filipino American History Month with these three amazing guests. And my goal, I'm going to try my best not to speak as much because I really want to soak in all I can from our special guests. And but before we even begin, and we promise you, we're going to give three of you the chance to introduce yourselves, and we're going to get in there with you. But before we even do that, I just want to bring up the whole subject of this celebration of this month, because today we kept going back and forth because some of you who've been following us, and we've got some messages on the side. We're like, what is it? You keep changing the title of your show. And it's because, we're still learning. Even me, myself, as a Filipino American, I'm still learning, or just beginning the journey, really. And you saw earlier we were calling it Filipino Heritage Month, and then it was Filipino History Month, and now it's Filipino American History Month. And so we're just going to start off on that conversation right off the bat, and then we're going to get to know our guests a little bit more. So we're going to go ahead and go to the next slide right here, and anyone can jump in. Those just to clarify to everyone, it is Filipino American History Month. It is not Filipino Heritage Month. And we can talk upon that and the reason why we honor that. Anyone can jump in. Dr. Bautista, Cindy, Imelda, you can go ahead and jump in at any time and tell us a little bit why do we call it, why is it important to us to call it the proper name?
Is it okay if I just read I'm going to read this. Yes. I'm going to read off of it, and I think it's just powerful. First off, Dr. Don Bahulano Mabalon was really instrumental in the San Francisco Bay Area and beyond, in really, educating all of us. And so history is inclusive of heritage and culture, but it's also about stories of how we changed this nation and ourselves in this process, our political struggles, transformations, labor, migration, activism, impact of imperialism and war, victories, etc., etc. Whereas heritage is more limited to what we pass down in our terms of culture, tradition, legacies. We have more than just culture. We made history, we helped build this nation, and that's what this month is all about. And I just think back to our manongs, from World War II, because I did a Kahoot with my students the other day on this, and I had forgotten about it, but there was an act in 1946 where basically the Filipino servicemen, Filipino American servicemen, were denied their rights, even though they served in our military. And it wasn't until 2017, I believe, if I remember correctly from the code, and we checked our sources, we made sure it's all good, that they received their Congressional Medals of Honors. And so if you think about the 1940s to now, many of those manongs were not able to receive those benefits because they've already passed. So that's just one example where people forget or have not heard our history. And when they do hear it, as Teresa said earlier, like, you can't unsee that, you can't unhear it. And so I'm very passionate about this.
Thank you so yes, and so everyone, that is just a snippet of how this conversation is going to go today. It's such rich conversation. So let's continue on with the intro. And thank you, Mrs. Ting. I love that. Okay, so our purpose today, we always talk about our purpose so that we know. Examine the importance of embracing human diversity. That's the purpose of our whole series that we've been having here. And our objective today is to learn about Filipino American history and how we can embrace the rich and diverse culture in and outside of our classroom. So let's continue, Mr. Racino. So we'll just go through these quickly so that we can get into it. These are our kids, everybody. I know we love to show them off, but they are really, our why here. They're the reason why, we feel like being represented is so important. And, we have our own personal stories. We were talking to Mrs. Ting earlier about how we need to back up our kids. They're in a different world today. So here's my son on the left, my 1-year-old, and my daughter here on the right, who's 13, and Mr. Racinos' daughter here in the middle, Tony Ray, as well.
Yeah. Our kids separate, not together.
Not together, but all still very cute. All right, and these are our kids in HLP, and we have thousands and thousands, and they're wonderful and beautiful, and we love to see the diversity in our district. So let's continue. Ding. Trying to get through this quick so we can get to the meat of our conversation. All right, here we go. So there are so many things that our colleagues here have accomplished, and we could not fit them all into one slide. You just simply Google their names, and these are the first things that pop up. So I'm sorry if we didn't feature every little thing, but we would like to give you a chance to introduce yourselves and tell us, what you're most proud of, what you want us to know about you as we begin our conversation here. So let's just begin. Mrs. Rodriguez, let's start with you since you're at the top left corner. I can see you right there. Introduce yourself to us. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So my name is Imelda Rodriguez, and I was born in the Philippines. And I grew up there, and I started my teaching career there as a high school teacher at the Ateneo de Manila High School. My family immigrated to the United States like 20 years ago, and I continued teaching at public and private schools. I'm already an American citizen right now, but deep inside, I'm still very Filipino at heart, because I still have the same beliefs, same values, and preferences.
Thank you so much. All right. So next, how about Dr. Bautista? Go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. I was born and raised in Carson, California, where there is a huge enclave of Filipinos, and I didn't really get to know about what that meant until I went to UCLA and took Filipino studies classes and learned a lot of the stuff that I'm really excited for us to talk about today. And that really helped me understand a lot of the different struggles and challenges and solidarity that our community has had with so many of the other communities I've grown up with. And I'm really fortunate to be able to be in a community of organizers that have helped me grow as a human being and as an educator. And I'm really excited to be here as someone who has been a classroom-based teacher, an administrator, and also an instructor at UCLA and at UC Riverside. So thank you all for having me.
Thank you so much. And we know it was so hard for you to find time today. And so we truly, truly appreciate you being here with us. We're excited to hear more. And last and definitely not least, Mrs. Ting, tell us a little bit about, or Tita Ting, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I tell students, if you're part of our we call it Dream Club, because at the time when they started it, they weren't able to do the ethnic monikers, or not monikers, but just, yeah. Anyway, it's a long story. I was originally born in Oakland, California, first generation. My parents came over in the 70s as part of the educational talent, professional talent that came over in that, I believe it's the fourth wave of immigration. And I also have an older brother that's severely handicapped. And so my parents navigating all of those things, new to the US, and we're pretty much by ourselves here. And grew up in the Bay Area. And I always felt that Filipino American and what other labels I had, I never fully was Filipino enough or American enough. But thankfully, my mom did take us to all of the fiestas and all of those things, and I was able to learn about my culture. And then I went to Chico State for college, where I earned my bachelor's in electrical engineering. And not only being Filipino American, some people didn't even know where the Philippines was. And then also being a woman in the tech field, it was really a time that I had to learn and explore really what that meant. So full circle kind of moment. Here I am, you know, several decades later, and I am teaching at a high school and just helping our children find their voices in their spaces and working with FONS OCIE. We're doing oral histories to help these children. I am a special education teacher. I teach students now currently with emotional disabilities, and really kind of just coming down to the acknowledging of them as an individual with beautiful talents and to find their strengths. So that's right.
Beautiful, thank you. And you don't see this view, but we see a lot of people trickling in right now, and we see some of their names, and some of these are our colleagues who are not from Filipino descent, and so we have these themes that go across of being too much of not enough of this, not enough of this, and so that's a lot of the conversation we'll be having, but all for the sake of culturally inclusive teaching. That's our goal, right? So let's continue on. Ricardo, we'll skip to the next one. So here we are. Our next question. What are some of the unique features and values that you have as a Filipino, and how do they appear in your teaching or your learning? So anyone can go first here. Does anyone want to take a jab at this question? Oh, I'm going to have to call on you. Okay, it's one of those. I got it. All right, that's all right.
I need a little wait time because I was thinking of how to say it. But what I tell my students is that really I am a Filipina mom first. I will love on them. I want to make sure they're fed. I want to make sure they're taken care of, that they're not sick. However, I may not condone their behaviors. So, we work hard, we play hard. And something that my parents always taught us is that, you get back what you put into it. And so I think that is very universal. And once you're part of my family, you are part of my family.
I love that. That's so true. I love that. How about you, Dr. Bautista?
For me, I just, and maybe people will say this is a stereotype, but I just love how much our people love to sing and dance and party. And so I think that is so important, that learning should feel fun. And so something that is really important to me is I always incorporate music and just really making sure that we have that joy and that connection. And one of the concepts that people talk about is kapwa, right? We're community. And so for me, it's always about how do we build community with each other? How do we do that through joy? How do we do that in ways that are authentic so that we can also be together for the hard stuff, right? Hold each other accountable, push each other, support each other when we're trying to learn something new. So I think for me, those are things that is part of being Filipino and how it shows up in my teaching and my learning.
Yes, definitely. And just because there are stereotypes doesn't mean they're not true. I was reading a post on stereotypes and I was cracking up out loud in the office earlier. But anyways, that's a whole other story. Okay, how about you, Mrs. Rodriguez? What are some unique features and values that you have?
Yeah, I think one of the things is hard work and dedication. I teach English language learners, and I've seen how they improved when they put in a lot of hard work. I remember one student who was struggling with English, and she was an ELD student. But when she learned that she had to read the text again and again and again, she had the number one spot in the district assessment. So yeah, really, she got the perfect score in the district assessment. So I tell them, work hard, boys and girls. I teach at Wadsworth Elementary School, and kids are improving because of hard work and dedication. It's the same thing that my principals have told me about how I am at school. I work very hard. And you have to be like that when you're an immigrant. You have to work doubly hard. And that's what I do at my school to be able to survive and thrive and even be recognized by my principal and the district and soon by the state. So it's one of the things. And the other one is respect, I think, because, in the Philippines, growing up in the Philippines, respect is you have to follow adults. You have to follow your parents all the time and sometimes without question. But then I had to adjust because here, students are taught to be assertive, to speak their mind, to assert their rights. So I said, you know what? Let's redefine respect. It can be that, I listen to you and you listen to me. and we respect each other's ideas. We express our disagreement respectfully and kindly. So I think those are the two most important things that I have shown to my students and that have helped me become effective as an educator in the United States. Yeah.
Oh, yes. I so much I want to say about that, but yes, I think you should talk to my daughter. I'll just leave it at that. All right. Yeah. Great, great, great. Okay, so let's continue. So, what are some of the challenges of growing up as a Filipino American, and how do you deal with stereotypes and misconceptions about Filipinos? Um,
Yeah,
let's start. You go
I
ahead.
want
Go
to
ahead.
answer that. I want to answer that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
please.
I come from the Philippines, and I've been through several schools. And there was one school when I was new, and the first question asked of me was, "Where do you come from?" I said, "The Philippines." And her reply was, "Isn't the Philippines a third world country?" So I was taken aback by that. And of course, I was not in a position to, like answer back disrespectfully. I said to her, "You know what? We are a rich country. We are rich in natural resources." And deep inside, I said, "You know what? I need to show to her what the Filipino is all about." So I worked very hard at my school. And, in time, she became my friend. And then she learned to appreciate, Filipino food, the lumpia and the pancit and everything. And even as I went to another school, she still sends me text messages. So I think in time I was able to show to her that we have a rich, we have rich natural resources, but more importantly, we have, a rich manpower and human resources. I think there's a lot about Filipinos that make us, stand out in our respective fields. We go through a lot of struggles, we make sacrifices, we work very hard, but eventually we survive and we succeed.
Yes. Anyone else want to take mic? All right. Well, I'm going to. Mr. Ricinos, you know what? I said that. Can you bring me back in?
Mhm.
Where did I go?
You there?
So I told the guests of the show, I said, this is this show I'm going to try to be silent and just listen, but I can't help it. I'm also part of the conversation. So I'm sorry, you guys, if I make the show longer, I apologize, but I have to jump in to this conversation. And, really growing up as a Filipino American, I might have a different story as a lot of my colleagues here and that I work with. But for me, my family, their whole goal was for me to assimilate as well as possible. They didn't want me to be anything different than everyone else. And I was very
Mhm.
different. I went to a school and all of my classmates were Caucasian. I was the only one of any color, and their goal was for me to fit in with them. So I grew up, my first language was Tagalog, but when I started school, my parents stopped speaking completely at home. They spoke only English because they thought, we want you to speak English. When they ask you what language you spoke first, you don't tell them Tagalog, you tell them it's English. And when they ask you, you tell them we speak English at home. I lost my language, and I remember them telling me that, and they were doing it out of love. They wanted me to fit in so well that I wouldn't feel left out, or they don't want me to stick out. But at the same time, I assimilated so well that I feel like I lost myself along the way. And like what Dr. Bautista said, she kind of came back to it in college. And it's just now in my life that I'm coming back to, wait, hold on. I have a history that I have forgotten about. And I think that was my challenge of growing up, is being someone who looks different, but trying to be everyone else. I was trying to be someone who I wasn't. And I think part of myself, I am American too, but I wasn't honoring my history, and I think that was a challenge for me. How do you deal with well, I think I spoke a lot about that. Anyone else want to jump in on this one? All right. Well, we're gonna move on.
No, I
We
think
said
she is, but she's muted. No, no, no.
oh, yes, all
Cindy
right.
is. Go ahead, Cindy.
Sorry, started talking. There's a I think Filipino Canadian, Ron Jossel, was saying that when he was growing up, his parents would speak to him with an accent, and so he would sound like this, and they would be like, "You speak Tagalog?" Or like, "No, I speak only English," but it's because they had the accent. And it kind of makes me laugh now, but I remember growing up and just, the same, like, once again, not Filipino, not American enough. Even when I went to the Philippines and lived there for 2 years, I was too American, and they would talk smack about me in Tagalog. I wasn't comfortable speaking it, but I understood everything they said. And then when the automaticity, that learning, because I went around 12, 13 years old, now I'm so thankful that I still speak Tagalog, because my mom, who is suffering from dementia, has gone back to her mother tongue only. And I'm the only one that can speak to her fluently nowadays. And so now I'm translator. And so it's kind of, once again, that full circle of our parents telling us, and I have peers and generations of friends that are saying they wish they had learned Tagalog, but because they wanted to assimilate and be American and just fit in, keep their heads low, that their parents didn't teach them that. And then we have conversations of, like, some of my students, like, well, they were born here, they're now third, fourth generation Filipino, and they don't feel Filipino enough or accepted by those because they don't speak Tagalog. So or those that speak Visayan or one of the other 700 dialects, like, because they don't speak Tagalog, are they Filipino? And it just, I get into that conversation. It just drives me crazy. I'm like, if you have an appreciation of the culture, where we came from, let's start there.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, we've kind of ventured off from this question, sorry everybody, and kind of got into the whole conversation.
I think Dr. Batista has something to say.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no,
This is why, right? This is why.
Teresa, I'm really glad that you shared that experience, because I think that rings true for a lot of Filipino Americans. And for me, I grew up in Carson, which is a really diverse community. But honestly, I didn't really see a lot of visibility for Filipino anything, right? So it was really challenging for me to see other folks to even know what it meant to be Filipino. And so what I have is like, oh, okay, like I see other Filipinos growing up in Carson. And so to me, like, all I know is like, oh, okay, I go to these events and there's a dancing and the cultural dancing and all that. But for me, it's just, I was also encouraged to speak English. I don't speak Ilocano. That's my family's language. And I know a little bit of it, but the assimilation is a real thing. And then when people do see me, they're like, oh, like I'm so racially ambiguous to folks because they just don't know who Filipinos are. So that I've passed for all kinds of different ethnic groups, which is cool and all, but it really, that's why it also felt like a crime. That why did it take me getting into UCLA, one of the hardest institutions to get into in California, to learn about who I was and my history, right? And it speaks to like that history of colonialism and how our families were pushed to assimilate, right? And also for survival reasons, right? And so, and also really ascribing to white supremacist ideas of how to survive. And so a lot of the internalized self-hate comes with being a darker complexioned Filipino. And so it's a lot of those, I mean, we could talk for days about this question alone and all the branches that it can lead us to, but I also just wanted to share some of those experiences as well.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for jumping in. Thank you, everybody, for jumping in. I kind of felt alone over there, but all those things ring so true for me. And I think, we're here as educators, but I also think, I'm a mother too, and I think of that as well. And I'm, I can still hear, my family talking to my daughter and talking to her about how dark she is, how tan she is, how she needs to stay out of the sun, and she needs, just so many things. And I know we're not going to go in that direction, but and I always tell my daughter, I'm trying to break barriers here. I'm trying to, like what Imelda says, there's a way to be true to who I am, but also honor who you are, finding that compromise between us. So, and I could, like I said, who mentioned it earlier? I think it was Dr. Bautista. We're like, we can have a series. Right? And
all the things.
Yeah. But for the sake of time, and I know we could be here forever, but for the sake of time, we'll just continue on in our conversation. But I love it.
Lots of love on the.
Thank you, Ron. I'm going to read what he said. Thank you to Ricardo, Teresa, and Dr. Bautista, Imelda, and Cindy. This episode is so powerful. As a person who identifies as Chicano and also part Filipino, this episode is powerful. I appreciate y'all. I blame Ron completely. For I'm just saying, I was this, peaceful person just doing my thing, and now I'm like, so thanks a lot, Ron, and really thank you. but just kidding. But and for introducing us to these wonderful people.
Yes.
So our next question is, how can we infuse Filipino culture and history into our curriculum and pedagogy?
I struggle with ethnic studies and being a separate course, and I feel that it should be ethnic studies as U.S. history. And we've had these conversations, and unfortunately, because the way things are written and blah 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 blah, we do have it. However, I really love that we are at least acknowledging it, and we are putting these curriculum in. And we've had conversations with our districts about, some people aren't going to ride the train. They aren't going to come on. Thank you, Mr. Wright. Yes. And I actually have the honor of taking some of the gen ed curriculum, ethnic studies for English, and I'm now infusing it with the special ed realm. So then we're also looking at ableism, racism, all of these things. And as they say, the winners write the textbooks. And this is now our opportunity to bring these things in. And so I intentionally have conversations at the district, at my school site about, let's honor each other, and talk about these different things. So.
Yeah, I want to speak as a teacher who has taught elementary, middle school, and high school. I taught language arts in high school and middle school, and there's not a single Filipino literature in place. So one time I talked to my department chair and shared with her, one of the stories of Jose Garcia Villa, and she said, "Oh my goodness, this is so good. We should have this in our curriculum." So I taught my class, one of the poems and one of the stories, at least one Filipino author, So I tried that in high school. In middle school, having taught U.S. history, ironic though, and California history, there's only one paragraph about Filipinos. I said, "What is this?" We're in the United States. There are 4 million Filipinos in the United States. Nothing much is said about Filipinos. So we are one of the underrepresented cultures in the United States. So I was very pleased last summer when Scholastic Books Club announced that the CEO was our speaker at our PD. He said, "Oh, we are going to be sending, publishers to the Philippines because we would like Filipino writers and artists to be able to publish some books." I was so excited about that. I think in time we can get there, but right now having a Filipino American History Month is a good start. And maybe we can, eventually focus on various aspects of our culture. Maybe we can have music, right? We can have, Filipino karaoke nights, or maybe we can have some cooking sessions of adobo or sinigang, and maybe the kids can learn, how to play sungka or whatever. I think we can do it little by little, but I think the most important thing is our Filipino values. I think that's what I have been inculcating in my students, the value of hard work, of honesty, integrity. Those are things that I think should be, taught to our kids, not by talking, but by modeling to them how they can be better persons, better people who are respectful of other cultures, who are willing to share, who are willing to, play and work and, have fun with other cultures. So I think I mean, celebrating Filipino American History Month does not mean just focusing on Filipinos and Filipino Americans, but I think it should be a part of a bigger culture which is diverse. So being acceptant, being tolerant of other cultures, because eventually, when we all pass on this earth, we all have white bones.
We're all the same on the inside. Yeah, definitely. Yes. Dr. Bautista, did you want to jump in on this one? I wasn't sure.
Is she?
I think she's frozen. It's okay. She'll probably be back in a bit. And how can we infuse foot? And so we have this conversation, and we know, those of you who are listening to, we're not just talking about Filipino American culture. This is something that should happen around, our space for all of our students. All of our students have different cultures, diversity. And, we always talk about, it shouldn't just be a month. This should be all year long. And then we're talking with Ron, and he was like, you don't even have to use the word ethnic studies. Like, it should just be automatic. It's just a part of everything. So, so many things in my brain. But for myself, because I wasn't even sure. We wanted to have this episode last year, but I was hesitant because I was like, you know what? No one really pays attention to this month. They just gloss over it. They don't even realize it happened. And then I even told my daughter, she's like, "Wait, when is it?" I'm like, "Oh, seriously? Your school is no." So that's true. And he told me, he said, "You have to do it. We can't just do Hispanic Heritage Month."
And it's actually ironic. We were having this conversation. Was it intentional that Hispanic Heritage Month and Filipino American History Month actually overlap?
Yes.
So the first Filipinos, was that intentional? Because the first Filipinos landed in Morro Bay,
1857. Yeah.
in 1587 as slaves on the Spanish galleons. And so there is the book by Dr. Anthony Ocampo of the Latinos of Asia, and we really do identify quite and Mel Arpilia, former national president of FONS, said when I was in high school I met him, and he said to us, the only difference during that time when we were colonized by Spain between Mexico and the Philippines was the Pacific Ocean. The same colorisms, the same stereotypes, the same genocide, all of that was happening at the same time. And because of these things, both Mexico and the Philippines still suffer from the colonial mentality. And then you bring in US imperialism, it's a whole thing. But once again, we are bringing these into the spaces. The students are actually asking the questions. I will say, I know in physical education, they actually have had students, I think in elementary, here in the United States, elementary and even into middle school, they'll have them learn Tinikling. Some of our students have asked for people to bring in Arnis Kalisikat. And then doing the cooking lessons, we actually do that at our high school. We have a whole international week. And I teach our students to cook the dishes. And it's really, it's amazing. Like I said, we have non-Filipinos learning how to roll the lumpia. And we talk about, it's like the tamale making parties, right? Like we're all having me about who's not there and who is. And we have such a rich culture that we do have so many different parallels.
Definitely. All right.
Yeah, and I just
yes, hi.
yeah, hi. I just also wanted to add, that also it's really important when we think about ethnic studies that it's a pedagogy, it's an approach. It's not just like a set of like content standards that we implement. It's like a way of teaching as well. So even if we don't have a formal ethnic studies class, there are ways to have ethnic studies in science. There's ways to do ethnic studies in social studies. And so for me, when I was in the classroom, it was always really important for me, even though we might not have had like the paragraph that we were allowed to read. I was very fortunate to be able to draw from my experiences at UCLA. And I always felt like, well, you know what? My brother, when he went to UCLA, he went home and he used to share with me things that he learned in those classes. And so I felt like, well, when I become a teacher, how can I infuse some of that content into my classes? And so I always found some opportunity to make sure that that part of a US or California history that did not include our history, I would bring it in. And so I always wanted to help. For me, a big part of the ethos in my class was solidarity and community. So I always figured out ways, like when we're talking about this, how can we also talk about what was the Filipino contribution in this part of the history? So I think that was one way that I always tried to incorporate Filipino history, even if there wasn't formal standards for it, but we were part of that history too, right? And so another thing for me also is I also want to give a huge shout out. I'm also at Venice High School for Filipino American History Month. What we're doing is actually every day of the month for morning announcements, our team does a really great job of sharing a little snippet of Filipino history. And today they were talking about Bonifacio, and I was like, okay, yes, let's talk about it. So it's really cool. And then one of our Filipino clubs on campus is trying to have a karaoke during lunch. So I just think that's really cool that they're trying to do that, invite our culture into the campus, let it be something that people can experience. So I also wanted to just add that too.
This is a really proud moment for me because I think in hearing hearing all of your contributions, I can feel like we're moving. We're moving. Not fast. We want things to be here, But you know
Mhm.
what? We're making little movements, and I think these conversations are so important. For yeah, I mean, you're teaching me. We're having these conversations with one another, and also those of our viewers as well are supporting us. So, um, wow, I feel very blessed. I feel very blessed. So let's continue on to our next. Oh, here we go. So all right, so is how do you celebrate Filipino American History Month in your schools and communities? And I guess the question really is, do you? And if you do, how do you? Because we're not going to assume that you do, because I
Mhm.
mean, at no one's fault really at this point. It is glossed over in a lot of areas, and
Mhm.
maybe they don't even mention it, or they put it together with Asian,
Mhm.
American history instead, or whatever it is. But so let's talk a little bit about whether or not you do, and if you do, what do you do? I guess.
Yeah, I started. We started celebrating Filipino American History Month at the district at HOPUSD last year, and the students did an art project based on the Mascara Festival. So they created. I love arts, so I taught them how to create masks. From whatever materials we had in the district. But I felt it was not enough. So what I plan to do this year is I'll have a Q&A. What do you want to know about the Philippines? Ask me because I grew up there. I was born there. And then I actually prepared slides beginning with the history of Filipinos in the United States, which I shared with Teresa and Ricardo. I think I want to begin with history and then maybe go into arts. And actually I do music like you mentioned earlier. I started the choir at my school because I grew up singing. My mom was a music, yeah. So I started a choir at my school, and all the techniques in handling a choir I learned growing up because I was in the choir myself.
Um,
But I also want to teach them a Filipino song this time. That way, I
wow.
actually, yeah, there's one song that I sang with the choir, and I'm teaching them this year. So I think in whatever way we can share our culture based on our interests, our abilities, our inclinations. Let's do that. Every little thing will help. But I want to do more for, even if I'm the only Filipino at my school and there are only a few of us Filipino teachers at the school district. I think we wanna continue, and it will begin with some fun stuff, especially for the kids. Like games, music, arts. So that's what I plan to do. And Teresa, please feel free to invite me again, and let's broaden
Yes,
awareness.
we have some work ahead of us.
Yes. So it's a good beginning. I'll start with the history so they understand that we should have started in 2009 celebrating Filipino American History Month because it was then when it became nationally acknowledged by the US that we should celebrate it.
Right, and we came this close to getting it again this year, and I have to thank Ricardo, and I have to thank Ron to be like, okay, you need to stop that.
Yeah.
It's
And
time.
Teresa, I danced the sayaw sa bangko. I can do
What?
that.
Okay, oh man, we have to
Yeah,
bring out all of
so
our dances.
Queen, Queen, yeah.
So how do you celebrate? I think Dr. Bautista did mention something earlier about they every morning they do a little bit to celebrate. So I really like that idea. That's really cool, actually. How about you, Mrs. Ting?
So, every year I attempt to kind of boost things up, and I've just had, as an educator and now going into this new role, literally feeling like a new teacher after 19 years in the classroom. I've come to realize it really needs to be student driven, right? And that's a big thing in our district is unlimited you. And we had to had discussions in the summer to actually do declarations into our school boards, not only for Anaheim Union High School District, but also for Anaheim Elementary School District. Also here in Fountain Valley, that's where my kids go to school. Dr. Catherine Stopp is also Filipino American. And, we have all these intentions to do these things, but once again, attempting to teach the students. So maybe next year we'll get it on board approval. But I'm looking for the link we did a Kahoot that we did just the other day, and making it fun. We also do school activities after school. So we have our kids. I purchased the Parejas Bingo. They're a Philam family based out of San Jose. Once I put the link, I can put the link in the chat. And we're going to play that with our students October 25th. But even throughout the year, we'll do things. So like Christmas time, we'll do Paskong Pinoy, or we'll do like last year we did one person did piñatas. We made the parol, so using the just popsicle sticks to make these things. So we kind of do things throughout the year. It's also in our student announcements. We've had history tidbits, and I've been empowering our students to utilize social media to create their own. Hey, these are Filipino Americans, not just the artists that you typically think they are, but even like the sports. I believe the quarterback is it from Notre Dame high school. He's Filipino and El Salvadorian and other sports people. So having them be empowered to share the news. So yeah, lots.
That's great.
Mhm.
I love this conversation. Sorry, a little biased. Yeah, of course, but
Yeah.
No apologies needed.
I think Dr. Batista is back.
yes. Did you want to add, Dr. Bautista, to ways that you celebrate with your school or community?
I think I accidentally jumped ahead and shared that earlier. So
No, that was perfect. And I did mention that. I said she did mention that earlier, which is a really cool idea. Actually, I might think about expanding upon that. In our own district. Ron, I know you're listening. All right, so we'll continue. We'll just keep the conversation. Oh, did you want to mention a little bit before we move on, Mrs. Ting, a little bit about the fawns? Did you want to talk about that a little bit, or?
Sure. So originally I had met Fonz back when I was in Northern California. I will say there is a difference between Northern California and Southern California Filipino communities. So it's very interesting. But I met them back in high school when I was a high school senior in the 90s. And that really kind of got me interested in learning our culture. And then, fast forward to now, I've been here in Southern California since 2011. I don't really have family down here. And so we've had to create our own communities. And I was looking to see, through the Fonz, I saw the Fonz OCIE chapter started during the pandemic. They met virtually and started to attend some of the things, and eventually became vice president. I am the kind of community and education liaison for a lot of different things. And it's been really fun to do the oral histories. We actually trained our students at the high school as part of their capstone projects and things that they are presenting, and we're working not just Filipino Americans, but just our community and capturing their stories in the pandemic. And I tell them, I'm like, you guys don't think that this is important, but 20 years from now, when we've kind of moved past this pandemic, you're going to look back and see how that's affected society. And it is just so fascinating to me. And of course, creating the aunties and uncles for my children. Now, I have a 13, a 9-year-old, and a 6-year-old at home. And then I'm also Lola to some of my grandkids that are in San Diego. And it's, I want them to have that legacy so that they know that that they are enough, that Filipino American, Filipinx American, we are all those things.
Mm-hmm.
Love that. And for those of you who don't know, I'm sure she might have mentioned it, but in case you're like me, FONS is the Filipino American National History Society. And so I did, as I was speaking to our colleagues earlier, I was telling them that I really am just beginning on this journey on learning more about my history. And I feel like I'm late to the game, but I'm happy to be here. So that's a great place to start for me to learn more, is to see where I can get more information, how I could be more involved, how I could get my family involved. And I think for my sake, but also for my daughter's sake, because even she is like, what? Like, this present is very important to me and my family. So I think our next question is, looking ahead, I think is our last question, actually. Wow, we made it in time. Looking ahead, what are your hopes and goals for the future in terms of recognizing and celebrating Filipino American history in education and the broader community? And I'm going to offer that to Dr. Bautista before her camera goes out. If you can tell, just trying. This is so hard. But.
Thank you for being so understanding. Yeah, I usually like to let other folks go first, but I'm like, oh, I hope my phone doesn't die again. It's so real. It's real out here. But honestly, I feel so happy I just feel like there's been so much more movement generally on more visibility on a lot of other communities. And I think that's really helped our community as well, being more visible. I didn't really see a lot of Filipinos. And if we were on TV, we were the Asian, we were Chinese, right? We were not Filipino. And I feel that there's so many more celebrities that are so proud. I mean, Filipinos, we're such proud people, and I just love how a lot of the new generation is really repping Filipino. I'm seeing ube and all that stuff more. It's just more.
All over.
I mean, it's right. I'm even seeing calamansi juice. I'm like, what? When did that become like a more normal thing?
Mhm.
They have lumpia at Costco in the freezer section. It's crazy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And that actually makes me feel really hopeful. And people are starting to see like, oh yeah, maybe we should actually have a Filipino nurse portrayed on the TV show. But it's so important. These ways of our community just becoming more visible. It's so important that really does give me a lot of hope that as we become more visible, that people will start to know who we are and start to think about and start asking questions about how to advocate and to support our communities. And so I'm also just really excited to see how we're always so present. A lot of other community movements. We're always in solidarity with a lot of communities, and so my hope is that also gets reciprocated in all the other movements to come. So thank you all, just in case my phone dies, but thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. I know you were only going to come for a few minutes, but you've lasted all the way to the end. So I'm just so
Thank you.
All right. So anyone else want to share your wishes? I guess your wish list. Looking ahead, what are your hopes and goals for the future when it comes to this? So anyone else?
I think in my case, like the various aspects of Filipino culture can be tapped into, like the language. I'm even thinking, oh, let's have Filipino vocabulary every day during Filipino History Month. The language, the arts, the music, the performing arts, literature, so many aspects of culture, not just food and dance. So I think anything that is a part of Filipino culture can be shared, maybe holistically or, one at a time. That way, people are going to realize that we are here, we are visible, and we are here for you. And yeah, because like during the pandemic, who were the people who were at the front lines, like the nurses, the Filipino nurses. So it's like there's a lot to be recognized. There's so many Filipino professionals who need to be, out there and, be recognized for their contributions, not only to, California, but to the whole country as well. And in the world too.
Yes, I agree. Tita Ting, you're getting some love here. Let's hear from you.
Kamusta yung mga estudyante ko? Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. They make fun of my Tagalog sometimes because again, it's my second language. But I try and I make it fun, and once again, learning is fun. And I think once again, I'm a very big, and I shared this earlier, I'm a very big believer in that people show up in our lives for different reasons and different seasons. And I tell all of my students that, I was once insecure, not knowing where they were at. I was a teen mom, single parent, and it was really rough out there. And through my struggles, through the challenges, imposter syndrome up the wazoo, like it wasn't until after pandemic and all these other things, like it just, like, and I finally, like, I'm leveling up to 48, in a few weeks, and actually a couple of weeks, and people are like, like, that's not that old, or they'll be like, oh, you only look like you're in their 30s. I'm like, thank you. But it has taken me decades to get to this space where I am comfortable in my skin. And as an educator, seeing the societal, systemic, all of these different things. And I hear, even the incident that happened with my daughter yesterday at her school, and hearing her fear of not being heard, of not being told. And I had a conversation with my students today that our jobs as educators is to believe in you, even when you don't believe in yourself. And
Mm-hmm.
that is one of the reasons everyone's like, you're crazy, you went into ED and all of this other stuff. And I said, I know that these years have prepared me for this journey so that I can give hope to these young people, these hurting children, that because of different environmental factors and things like that, I can provide a safe space. My staff can provide a safe space. And even to each other, our colleagues on our campus, I come walking into the office and I start singing, and they always know that it's me. And even when I'm having a bad day, it's they come and support me. And our world is so different than what we grew up in. And I have no idea what some of these children go home to, but when they come onto our campus and especially into my classroom, it is a space for them where they are allowed to fail forward. And I want all children to have that opportunity and to feel safe. So yeah. And some days it's harder than others, and I have to come home and be like, okay, I can go do this again tomorrow. And I'm so thankful for the communities that we have available to us. And I hope that you will continue to be part of my life and our communities continue to grow. And as we know, we've cross people all over. So I know this will not be our only time collaborating.
Well, you can't get rid of us even if you wanted to.
Not anymore. Not anymore.
We have now, after Ting, you are for now and forever Ate Ting.
That's right. I know. That's cool.
So I was trying to think of my answer, and it's just so complicated for me because as an educator, I think of my goals, but also I bring it back to as a mother for my children, and right now, selfish moment for myself because of where I am in this journey. It really is, I'm learning so much about my history, about my past, my parents, my family, so many layers of things, and I just want my daughter and all other students to have a safe space, to be proud of who they are, to never have to be ashamed of who they are, to understand how we got to where we are today, and never have to deal with someone who's going to judge them on how they look, how they sound, the accent, and that's the world I grew up in, and I couldn't say things correctly because that's not the way I was raised, and so I remember dealing with that, growing up. And Ricardo, everyone, they know my story. My whole first year in education, my teachers thought I was mute. I didn't speak a single word, not a single word. And they thought I was selectively mute. And no, it was the language, and just that fear. And I hope for students, Filipinos and everyone, to not have to fear when they're in school, not be afraid of who they are in their skin, just be who you are, and just, love everybody. I know that's a big ask, but that's really why we're here, right? So we're showing our pride for our own culture, but we're doing it in hopes that resonates across for everybody. So we can go on and on, but thank you so much, everybody, for being on the show. That means so much to all of us, especially myself. And this is not the end. This is the beginning of the conversation. So happy Filipino American History Month to all. And we have resources. Imelda made some resources. We have resources from others who have sent us things, and we will share those with you as well. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful Thursday, and we will see you again.